Hi, guys. Happy Friday, and welcome to the League of Extraordinary Atheists, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics and much, much more. Tonight, I am bringing you part three, and I will be doing it solo of the three-part series I've been doing. We took a break last week because our country is in the middle of a lot, and I thought there was just too much to talk about. And so we're going to pick it up again tonight. And I'm very excited actually to bring this part to you. The first two parts I will cover quickly. I'll go over quickly for anyone who missed them and just kind of set it up. Because as I said at the end of each part one and part two, this is the story about Vice President Henry Wallace. However, we haven't got to him yet. So, but those things needed to be said, and we needed to look into them and to understand how this coup, for a lack of a better word, happened to Wallace and how close we were to having someone as progressive as myself as president, even in this country. So, in part one, we had to understand that in the 20s, the Democratic Party was very conservative, and many of the members of that conservative Democratic Party were high leading members of the KKK. It was a different party. Scientists were very conservative in the 20s. Many were. It was the roaring 20s. Things were so much different. And we went through how the end of the 20s, the 30s, had just changed so much. You have scientists who were one of the most conservative bunches of people on the planet, especially here in the United States, went from being the most conservative to the most progressive. One of the leaders of I forgot the name, a group that's still enacted today. It's the science. I will go underneath this video and remember and put it like I normally do. Anyway, he was so progressive that he not only supported by words but by actions the Russian Revolution to help the people. It didn't end up working out how they wanted, but that's the idea of a social government that was ran by and for the people. So the scientists and the Democratic Party were so conservative. And then World War I happened. And after World War I, there were a lot of the people that did make it back, the men that did make it back, and the women. There were lots of nurses and women in the military then too. They just did different things. They came back and were promised money for going and risking their lives, and they weren't going to get this money anytime soon. And people were losing their houses. They didn't have food. So there was the March on Washington. And so people were starting to get active, and they were starting to, demand what they felt they deserved, not anything more. And this money had been planned to go to them, just not yet. And they did a march on Washington, and a lot of bad things happened. We're not going to go into that story. Eventually they did get paid, but that activism and what we were as a nation after World War I was a different people than what we were before we went in. And there was a lot of not anti-Americanism, but seeing a lot of what the war was for what it was. It was a imperialist war. It was a multinational corporations, fighting for conquering and taking is what it was. And so people were disillusioned, and they thought, we're going to have to start doing some actions here at home. And so that was going on. There was a progressive wing of the party then as well, and it did start to grow. It started to grow actually a lot because of Henry Wallace and people like Henry Wallace. I have, let's see, in part 2, where we picked up where we left off, where FDR, he wasn't a super lefty at all. He didn't even run for president as this social democratic president, not even a little bit. He ran as a right down the middle Democrat. It was his wife and the people around him and the movements. I mean, there was labor movements, and he had people. Henry Wallace actually was his Secretary of Agriculture for the first 2 terms, and he was so well liked by the farmers. I mean, think about farmers being progressive in this country. That's mind-blowing. But they were, and he didn't just go out and shake hands and say things. He also stayed in touch with them and made those things he said he would do turn into policies. And not only did he help the farmers during the Depression and after, but he made them whole again. They were actually progressing and making profits again. So he was very well liked in middle America, and he was very well liked on the coast where people were more progressive. So we have the middle America liking Wallace, and we have the coasts liking Wallace. And I found out there was a guy in Florida actually who his last name was Pepper, but his nickname was Red Pepper because of how left he was, who was also fighting for him. So there was a correlation of people in this nation that were fighting for it. They just weren't the majority. So we're going to kind of take it from there. Like I said, we hadn't really even gotten to Henry Wallace, who the story is about, where we pick it up tonight, and this part, where it all gets exciting and kind of, I don't know, I hope that I can show through this story the correlation of, contemporary Democratic Party, of the more corporate oligarchy wing, and then we have the more progressive wing, the more citizen involved wing, and that's what we're seeing happen. And in this time period, you got to understand, FDR won 4 times as president, and his 3rd term as president, he got Henry Wallace on the ticket, and that is how a lot of the programs that we have today still, if they weren't dismantled, were from having a Wallace vice president next to an FDR who would listen to ideas and try them out, whether they worked or didn't. If they didn't, he'd stop them and try something else, and that really pissed off the conservatives because they thought he's just wasting money. Let's get data to see if it works. And I do understand that, but I also know that during that particular time, we were facing fascists around the world. There was a depression. There was just too much to lose to not try something to see if it worked. And so that's another reason why I like FDR. He had some cojones. He would try it, and he welcomed their hatred in his own words. So I don't know. You guys know he's my favorite president thus far. So we start with our journey through this time, the coup of Vice President Henry Wallace. It was the subject of 1 and 2, and how ousting Henry Wallace from VP position started. So that's what we covered, kind of setting up this ousting of Vice President Henry Wallace. Now, he had been vice president for 1 term, that's 4 years, and this was FDR's 3rd term. FDR's getting ready to run for his 4th term, and he wants Wallace on the ticket. Wallace was the VP position for him was kind of a spit in the eye to the corporate side of Congress. They weren't very friendly. to kind of make you understand, think about how Bernie's treated, or anyone's treated, Mike Gravel, how he's treated, how Ralph Nader's treated. Same thing was kind of going on, and this was the vice president. I want to talk about how this portion of our nation's history correlates with today's contemporary split. So the labor movement was the backbone of the Democratic Party in the 1930s. A huge shift towards human rights, workers' rights, and intellectualism was sweeping across the country, and FDR rode this new wave all the way to the White House. And he did like this new way of thinking. He liked forward thinking. He would look at something that has been done or is continuing to be done and it's not working, and in his mind he could not comprehend why it's still being done. You know, he really was able to catch this progressive wave that was riding the country because of how horrible things were for the majority of people. Henry Wallace, who was his Secretary of Agriculture for the first 2 terms of FDR's presidency, as I had just said, he had helped FDR tremendously with the New Deal. Okay, so we are facing fascism. Fascism was taking hold around the world. FDR knew that this was going to, be a big deal, and he also knew that he was going to run again for the 4th term. And he also knew that he would have to probably deploy troops this time. It was too much to sit back. He had a, neutrality stance up until this point. So he wanted the most anti-fascist, the most pro-human rights guy he could find. And that person was his Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace, who happened to be a Republican for most of his life. So that's interesting too. But this is also right after the switch in the party, where KKK was very much Democratic and Republicans weren't. That doesn't mean that they weren't racist. It just means that it was a different type of racism. It was a corporate racism. But that's a story. We can talk about how the parties flipped, how the Democrats became more progressive than the Republicans and vice versa, and another story if anyone's ever interested in that. Farmers were very satisfied with the rebound in profits Wallace helped farmers get. He helped them through policies. So, it wasn't just words. Like I said, he actually made policies happen for them. The Middle America knew who they wanted as vice president for this 3rd term. Labor wanted Wallace as well, but not the party bosses, not the labor bosses. They stated that they couldn't trust him because he hadn't always been a Democrat. Sound familiar? It's always something ridiculous, not his actions or everything that he has to prove on paper and in real life, but the fact that at one time he wasn't a label that you approve with or approve of. Wallace changed his party affiliation in the mid-30s to Democrat. Think about that, though. What was going on? So much. It had changed. All the scientists now were progressive. So he was just following the policies he believed in. But mostly they thought that he was much too radical and way too loud, outspoken, and progressive. They couldn't have somebody that would speak truth to power and follow through, not just say something, and for that soundbite, it would be the radio back then. Of course, there's no TV, but on the radio programs, it would be a soundbite, and not Wallace. Wallace followed through. The New Deal and all of the progressivism that was at stake, and if FDR passed and Wallace wasn't the VP, this was on both sides' minds. Some more than others, most for sinister reasons. Not sinister for them personally or financially, of course, but sinister for the regular citizen and the worker. Us, the American people. The New Deal hired millions, created so many opportunities. And, look into those New Deal opportunities. so many things that were created for rural America, they never got to see an opera. So he would make opera, not make, create actors and opera singers that would put on shows, travel, and they would get paid by the US taxpayers. It was a job that he created under the New Deal. There's so many like that were so important. Music programs are so important. Science programs that travel around and let kids that normally wouldn't get to see things that are in high tech, high schools, get to see. These were programs that he not only supported but made policy. FDR isn't alone in the progressiveness of the New Deal. There's Frances Perkins. I'll say that again, Frances Perkins, look her up. An American sociologist and a workers' rights advocate. She served as the U.S. Secretary of Labor from 1933 to 1945. She was the longest serving in this position and first female appointed to the U.S. cabinet. So she's kind of a big deal. She was a huge reason that the New Deal was so progressive, was her involvement. Another name to look up is Harold L. Ickes, Ickes. Another amazingly progressive politician. I just wanted to mention him. If you guys wanted to take a note of the name and look them up, you should, because they're part of the history that makes us, our history here. And without just these two people, things would have been so different. So it's important to know these people and their legacy. So many politicians were progressive during this era. You've got to understand. It's why the coup of Wallace and what happens under Truman is so detrimental to the Democratic Party. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Sorry about that pause. Wallace was actually the last of the New Deal Democrats. Mr. Bean, of the New Deal Democrats under Truman and beyond until 1946. Mr. Bean, do you want to be part of this? Because it sounds like it. You have something to say? Sorry, guys. Sometimes he just has to protest something. I'm going to mute this while I blow my nose. Much better. Thank you. All right. So Wallace was actually the last of the New Deal Democrats under Truman, who became president when FDR died. Until 1946. So, that's a long time period for one of the New Dealers to even be involved anymore. It was just decimated. Truman and his neocon administration purge of the party and all the progressives, kind of like how Perez did while leading the DNC. I'm sure if you guys pay attention to politics, you know that there was Ellis and Perez up for that seat to be leadership of the DNC, and the people wanted Ellis because he was a progressive, and the DNC is a private corporation and it can listen to our ideas and views, and it does, but it still chooses what it wants, and they chose Perez, and Perez likes to get rid of a lot of the progressive ideas and has. Well, that's as similar as I could find to what was going on in this time period. However, in this time period, Truman and his administration were more ruthless getting rid of anyone. You gotta understand this was also right before the Cold War and outing everyone who had a left thought in their life, calling them, communists, and kicking them out of the country. So this is leading up to a lot of bad shit. Or like corporate media does when purposefully not showing parts of the news, omission, creating a narrative that does not allow for progressive ideas or not inviting progressives on this was also techniques that were being used during Truman's administration and prior to him becoming the president. Making progressives seem so far out and radical was the whole point of what they were doing. These things were being done immediately under Truman, too, by the way. It was almost as if they had written up an agenda. Just as we watched Bernie Sanders get purged in the 2016 convention, that's almost exactly how Wallace was. But we're talking about vice president and presidency, not candidacy. Truman purged the New Dealers from the Democratic Party and the cabinet in the mid-1940s. So he slowly went one place by, throughout our government and made sure that anybody who wanted to fight for regular people and not for profit, if you want to fight for people and there's profit involved, that we can work with that. But just do the right thing for the right reason. That would be, I guess, what I'm talking about. I don't know. I think, sorry, I hit something and I went away. Okay, I'm back. I just couldn't see me for a second. Okay, back to Wallace. He's really my favorite vice president. I know I've said that a few times, but like ever. Wallace was the leading progressive force in the party. FDR fought so hard to get Wallace on the ticket for vice president in 1940. FDR wrote a letter to the Democratic Convention when it looked like they were not going to allow Wallace as his VP for his third term. He wrote, quote, "We already have a conservative party who's dominated by Wall Street, the Republicans. And if the Democrats aren't going to be a liberal, progressive, social justice, human rights party, then they have no reason to exist." And he ended this strongly worded letter with his resignation as president. So if I can't have Wallace as my choice of vice president, then I don't want to be president. FDR's wife, Eleanor, went to the podium prior to this letter actually reaching who it was supposed to. She's just a smart lady, man. She knew I've got to do this and I've got to do this right now. On the floor of the convention and at the podium, at the microphone, she warned everyone of her husband's intentions, that he wanted to be running for a third term and it would be with Wallace or not at all. They begrudgingly put Wallace on the ticket. So FDR's third term as president was with Henry Wallace by his side. And you can take a look at his 4 terms. And his second, he got a lot done. But in his third, they really, really kicked ass and just made this country better for the average person. Now, I am not out of touch. I do know that a lot was done to prevent people of color to also benefit from many of these programs. So not the best legacy, but we're talking about better than it was. So also in the newspapers and magazines of the time, when Henry Luce, L-U-C-E, he is a magazine magnate. He was supposed to be one of the most influential men of the time. A wealthy, bad word. Like, I would rather not say it. He said that in his publications that the 20th century must be the American century, i.e. USA dominates the world, imperialism. Henry Wallace countered with a brilliant speech that everyone sat around the radios in their houses to listen to, stating in it that the 20th century must be the century of the common man, and he called for a worldwide people's revolution. Oh, I love him. And it's Henry Wallace that says that America's fascists are those people who think that Wall Street comes first before the people. I'll say this again. A person who was vice president of this country said that America's fascists are those people who think that Wall Street comes first before the people. Man, if we could have just a little bit of that. Vice President Wallace was the enemy of Wall Street, and he was proud about it. He also opposed colonialism. Love him. Imperialism. Love him. Just like we here at LEAH do as well. I am anti-imperialism. I do not think that one country should have that much power and control other countries' wealth or resources or come in and tell them that they have to take a loan out. You know, the whole World Bank bullshit. He was against this, and these things hadn't been written into law yet. And Wallace would not have let them. You got to understand, he was not going to let. This is the League of Nations and stuff was being built. These things that could have been would have been a much different world that we're living in right now. Wallace had enemies everywhere because of these last two, especially the anti-imperialist and anti-colonialism. The English and the French mostly, because at this time, prior, to letting go of a lot of their colonies, they just couldn't handle America having so much power and their second in command being against the things that they do and that make their nations lots of profits. Wallace was the leading voice for Black civil rights. The leading voice. He got a lot of crap for it too. He was the leading voice for women's rights. We didn't even have TV, guys. This guy was so ahead of his time. He was the leading voice for education rights. He thought every human deserved an education, a good quality education where facts and not propaganda are taught so that we can become a better society that makes better decisions on educated guesses. So there's so much more that Wallace was about. Wallace represented all that is good and moral in progressivism, in my opinion. And like anyone who is just a good person doing things because someone has to, and it's the right reason, he has uncounted enemies. Now think about that. He did things because it was the right thing to do, and that created enemies. That's why someone like him is so important to have as a leader, because when the enemies of people doing the right thing for only the right reason win, we live in a more fascist world. We live in a more authoritarian world. And we live in a more unjust financially world where the wealth gets sucked up to the top and nobody's there to call it out and actually have enough power to create policies to stem that kind of crap. He had enemies all throughout the country, not just in England and in France. Even in today's terms, Wallace would be to the left of Bernie Sanders. So the enemies he was making were not just on the other side either. The enemies he was making were the oligarchy part of the left who didn't like the idea of not being able to go down to the tropics and make the tropical areas grow the fruit that we eat here and not let them grow anything else. Tell them, no, you can't grow the food that your country eats and needs. You need to grow the bananas we need you to grow. He was against these things. And so the enemies he created, very powerful. FDR, not being so far to the left, knew that Wallace was popular throughout the country and was very far left. He was very cognitive of these things. He made choices almost like chess maneuvers throughout his leadership, surprising a lot of people, actually, especially the ruling class, who were no matter if the country was in a depression or doing well, were the same. he surprised them. And that's what I think sparked such anger against him and FDR. I mean, him and Henry Wallace, FDR and Henry Wallace. As the Democratic Convention launches July 20th, 1944, Gallup polling, which is fun to look up old Gallup polling. It's all documented. So their polling asked voters who they wanted on the ticket next to FDR. 65% of the country said Henry Wallace. Can you imagine 65% of this country agreeing on anything political, at least? Only 2% said that they wanted Harry Truman. Wallace was the second most popular man in America, right behind FDR. When magazines asked their readers in the late 1930s who should replace FDR if he should pass away or step down, this is the 30s before he kept becoming president, the number one choice came back as Henry Wallace from all their readers. Wallace was a safe and moral choice in 1940. And despite what the ruling class elite and labor bosses were saying, Wallace would have been the best, safest choice in 1944 as well, for countless human lives, not just here in the United States. We were fighting a war against fascism in the 1940s, and we were a different country, a different mindset of people. The United States was a much more progressive country who voted for much more progressive policies en masse as a society. Wallace had the popular support, the union support, every single Black delegate at the Democratic Convention. That says a lot during this time. In 1944, Wallace was the choice of the people. FDR knew this in 1940 and fought for him, and knew this again in 1944. FDR wanted the leading anti-fascist on his ticket, knowing what we were up against in the 40s and the war. The Democratic Party dumped Wallace from the ticket anyways, knowing all of that, all of the facts, the people, the 65%, all the readers writing back they wanted Wallace, the farmers writing they want Wallace. The Democratic Party, the DNC, which is a private organization, did not care or give two licks, whatever that means. I don't know. Would I give two licks? I don't think I want to lick any of this. I don't know why I said that. Why is that a saying? If anybody knows, put in the comments why giving two licks is a thing. I'm actually interested why I do say that on a regular basis, or why anyone would say that. All right. 1944. Support was for Wallace. The leadership of the Democratic Party literally planned a coup to oust Wallace and replace him with a more corporate-friendly puppet. FDR, by 1944, is very weak. I mean, anybody who was around him, who was close to him, understood that he was very weak, and walking wasn't an option, even with the help of his brother. It was clear to all around him that he would probably not make it this whole full 4 years of a term. They could not allow a President Wallace. So Wallace could not be vice president because, gosh, the world would be different. These people prevented the progressive people in the party from ever getting access to FDR. That happens a lot in politics, especially these days where, Trump's administration can just stop the access of anybody they want. They can, and I'm sure it's been like that always. If an administration doesn't agree, I think, with an idea or a group of people's ideas, I feel that it's the administration's responsibility to listen to it anyway, responsibly. You don't have to like it, and you don't have to agree with it at the end. You have to change your mind about it, but you do have to listen when your salary is paid by the people you should be listening to. But that's, me, small rant. Okay, so after, not allowing President FDR to have a Wallace on the ticket, and preventing the party from ever getting access, preventing people, progressives, from getting access to FDR on a regular basis while he was at work. They would switch papers around. So a lot of people, labor people, a lot of progressive farmers wanted to get in there and make sure that they were being heard. And we have all the documents from that time of it being stopped. Like shenanigans really prevent at any cost any progressive people getting near him right now. He's too weak, so he depends on us. So we will just not let those things happen. The corporate wing took the convention, basically. They stacked it with anti-Wallace delegates. The only problem was Wallace was so very popular. July 20th, 1944, the night that the convention starts, Wallace makes a speech on the convention floor on FDR's behalf. Even though the party bosses already have the convention stacked against Wallace, fixed, rigged even. Sound familiar? I know. After Wallace's speech, however, there is a spontaneous demonstration on the convention floor. There are hundreds, so many signs that just pop up that say Roosevelt and Wallace. That wasn't that wasn't a ticket. That wasn't an available option. But now there's all these people on the floor, demanding a protest, a demonstration, demanding that Wallace stays the vice president. And it lasts for about an hour. Like, these people they're not going home. They want Wallace, and they understood that it was being rigged against him. In the middle of this massive demonstration, Senator Pepper, who I had mentioned, nicknamed Red Pepper because of his left liberalism, from Florida, that blows my mind. He was senator from 1936 to 1951 as a libertarian leftist, realizes that if he can just get to the microphone and get Wallace's name and nomination in right then, while all this is going on because of the rules of the convention, if he could just do that, then Wallace would sweep the convention and get the nomination for VP and defy the bosses and get back on that ticket. And now the rules do show this. And now there's this demonstration going on, and it's massive. So he has to get through this to that microphone to make this happen. Now he knows he can make it happen, especially with all this going on. Red Pepper fights his way to the microphone. Some of the party bosses see what's going on. Mayor Kelly of Chicago is screaming that the demonstration is a fire hazard all of a sudden and to shut it down. He's hysterical about it. Sam Jackson, a party boss, said he had orders to not allow Wallace to get the nomination no matter what. And he yells, quote, "I've got a motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Maybe 4 to 5% of the entire convention says aye. All opposed say nay. The rest of the convention screams nay. I mean, it is deafening." Jackson then replies, quote, "Motion carried," bangs the gavel, meeting adjourned. Does any of this sound familiar? Because I saw that happen with Bernie. This is just bigger because it's presidential. Red Pepper was literally 5 feet from the goddamn microphone when all this happens. Had Pepper gotten 5 more feet, grabbed that mic, enter Wallace's name nomination, Wallace would have been VP again. In 1944, and president on April 12th, 1945, when FDR passed away instead of Truman. And holy cow, would have history been so much different for so many people. There'd have never been atomic bombs dropped on anyone. There would have almost certainly never been a Cold War, and there would have never been McCarthyism here in the States, ousting teachers because they agree that people all should have food. Horrible, horrible bullshit, calling people communists because their neighbor was a communist or their father was a communist. Who cares if they're personally a communist? It was a witch hunt. It was the same thing that happened to witches back in the day. You know, people just called them something and there was no way to disprove their magic, so they burnt them. And I don't think that would have happened. Maybe someone could convince me with evidence that it still would have happened that way, but not underneath a Wallace presidency. It would have been so different. So, my friends, that's how close we came to a very different legacy. 5 gosh darn feet. 5 feet. We come within 5 feet to having the most progressive politician this country's ever had as our nation's president. Is pretty mind-blowing to me. And if you're not a history buff and this is all just kind of like, yeah, it happened, it's cool too. I get it. I'm not into a lot of things either. But to me, this is just a mind-blowing story that, you know, I've seen all the pictures. I've listened to all the speeches of this time, and I imagine that room. I've seen the pictures of the spontaneous demonstration, and I can imagine it that, like, I've got to get to the mic to save democracy, to save that Henry Wallace has to be obviously everybody wants him to be except for the ruling class. 5 goddamn feet. So I think it's a great tale. I hope you guys do too. And all of it's true. All of it's true. This history is written as almost as an adventure drama with a bad ending. But it's true, and it is our history. We share this history together as Americans. This is why we have to fight harder than ever to get any progressives into leadership. Is because precedent has been set. They got away with it over and over. You know, in 1917, 1919, same thing happened with. It's uncounted. At least right now, it's not uncounted. There's 6, but I haven't finished all of the presidencies that this kind of things have happened to, where the people want something. There's all this evidence. People are actually there to support something, and the ruling class just says, "Oh," pats it on the head and says, "Meeting adjourned. We don't agree." And I have to end this presentation with democracy is not a spectator sport. Doesn't mean you have to be in the streets. It means you can do something like Mac, Nacha, and I do. You know, just getting information out. And this might not be a current news that I'm getting out during doing this 3-part, but it is important news that correlates with what we see today, and how when all of these entities, the labor unions, the black delegates, when all of us can get on the same page and acknowledge we have differences, but the end result we want is the same, so let's fight this together. I think that's what it's going to take. And I have so much hope right now with 17 days in the streets, America. 17 days. I'm so proud. And I hope that this type of story doesn't repeat itself when we get a chance, if we get a chance to have another progressive leader. And I hope that all of you guys, not just the people that are here, but whoever may hear this, and all of your friends, if they don't want to watch this, just let them know. Get involved. I don't care who you vote for, vote. I don't, if you care about democracy for whatever party, you have to be active. And so just pass that message on. And I'm glad you guys came and hung out with me tonight. Mac will be back next week. I have all kinds of news to cover because so much has happened. But like I've said before, we do take requests. So if there's ever, hey, tell me more about this, or what happened in this story. I'm curious if you could, or you'll want to find out. I always want to find out. So you could go to our Facebook page and leave us a message there. You can do it on Twitter. You can do it to me personally. You can do it to me personally. Oh yeah. What words do I know how to use tonight? You can message me personally and let me know, hey, I want you to cover this. I would love to cover things that you guys are interested in too. Although I love covering things that I'm interested in, obviously. And happy Friday, guys. If you are protesting, wear a mask and be safe out there. And I support you. And motherfucking Black Lives Matter. Stay humanist for godless sakes.